Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is intended solely for educational and entertainment purposes. What you're about to hear is based on the verbatim testimony presented in federal court during the trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as documented by Inner City Press. The atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Surprise witness stepped forward. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't an ex-lover. She was something far more unexpected, Diddy's former maid. For years, she tidied up after his most exclusive, most secretive parties. She signed airtight NDAs. She kept her head down, and most importantly, she kept quiet until now. She testified about destroyed documents, bed sheets stained in red, and bizarre, unsettling items discarded like trash. But what truly sent shockwaves through the courtroom? A partially burned passport photo of a girl who had been missing for years, a girl the world had forgotten. Until that moment, gasps filled the room as the prosecutor held up the evidence. At the defense table, Diddy sat frozen, sunglasses on, but clearly rattled. What this housekeeper saw behind closed doors wasn't just strange, it was damning. And for the first time, the world caught a glimpse of a version of Diddy he had tried desperately to keep hidden. She entered wearing plain black, a simple dress, no makeup. Her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun that silently said, "I'm not here for the spotlight." Her identity was kept secret for her safety. In court filings, she was only referred to as Housekeeper X. But as she sat in that witness box, the energy in the room shifted. There were no cameras allowed, but journalists later described how Diddy leaned, back in his chair, arms folded, jaw tight, sunglasses unmoved. He didn't react. Not until she began to speak. Her voice was calm. She explained she had worked for Diddy from 2014 to 2020. Her contract was private, built entirely on discretion and silence. She wasn't part of the party. Crowd? You wouldn't see her on social media or in backstage footage. She came after the chaos. When the music stopped, and the guests either left or passed out, "I saw a lot," she said, briefly glancing toward Diddy's table. "I didn't understand most of it at the time. I just did my job." But then she recounted one Monday morning, a morning that would change everything. She arrived at Diddy's Beverly Hills mansion around 6:15. Then the house was eerily still. No leftover music, no chef clanking pans, just silence. She began her usual chores, starting with garbage duty. She wheeled one of the trash bins out to the service garage. But something smelled off. A foul, smoky mix of melted plastic and something acidic. One of the burn cans was still warm. Inside, ashes. But not just from documents. There were melted photo frames. The corner of a scorched manila folder. And then, wedged between the debris, a torn passport photo. She hesitated. She wasn't supposed to look, but something about it pulled at her instincts. "It didn't feel right," she said. At that point, even the judge leaned forward. The prosecutor held up the very photo fragment she'd reported. It was singed and warped. But the image still came through. The smiling half face of a teenage girl. The jury studied it in silence. Diddy shut his eyes and rubbed his temples. The prosecution would go on to refer to this testimony as the House of Ashes, and the woman who had once been invisible, the maid, would become its most haunting witness. She took a steady breath, clenched her hands in her lap, and continued. She explained how she rarely saw the full extent of the parties, the flashing lights, the famous faces, the deafening music, but what she did witness was what they left behind. What followed those nights, that's where the real story began. They called them the after parties, she said. That's when the people who were supposed to leave didn't. The lights dimmed even further. Security tightened. Phones were locked away in velvet-lined pouches. And the guests? Different. Not always famous. Some looked nervous. Some looked frighteningly young. Her cleaning instructions on those nights came with strict boundaries. Do not enter the East Wing bedrooms. Do not clean the downstairs den. Only take trash from designated areas. But she confessed she didn't always follow those rules, not out of defiance, but out of fear. Another housekeeper had once whispered to her, "It's not the stuff you find that gets you in trouble. It's pretending you didn't find it." One night, cleaning the guest bathroom, she discovered a blood-stained towel, tightly rolled, jammed behind the toilet. She alerted security. They took it away without a single word. No questions, no conversation. Another time, while tidying up the main hallway, she noticed deep scratches in the wood floor, long jagged marks like something heavy had been dragged, but nothing prepared her for what she called the ritual table. It was a long wooden dining table, coated in hardened candle wax, covered in burned photos, broken glass, feathers, and after a pause, what she believed was dried blood. "I wasn't told to clean it," she said, "but I had. To walk past it. Every day, no one ever touched it. It sat there and like a relic. One day it vanished, completely gone. The next week it returned. The judge asked if she had ever reported any of this. She shook her head. I signed too many papers, she said, and I'd seen what happened to others who spoke up. They didn't get warnings. They just disappeared. The courtroom fell silent. No one, not even the defense, interrupted her now, because the words ritual and disappeared had been spoken, and there was no taking them back. She explained it wasn't just one incident. It was a pattern, a cycle every time one of those elite after events happened. The same disturbing trail followed. Charred documents, torn receipts, half-burned Polaroids, and unsettlingly, more photos of strangers. Faces she didn't recognize. People she never saw at the parties. One night she found a sealed envelope with a red stamp. It simply read, "Restricted." Inside were 5 shredded contracts, names redacted, but each mentioned agreement of participation and full compliance. The pages reeked of alcohol and smoke. One of them had a torn $100 bill pressed between the sheets, ripped clean down the center. She admitted to secretly taking the fragments home. She hid them in a small lockbox under her bed. She didn't know why, only that something felt off. Weeks later, while shopping for groceries, it all came together, pinned to the community board at the front of the store. A missing persons flyer. A teenage girl named Malia, last seen at a private yacht party. In 2016, she froze. Her groceries hit the ground. She walked straight out of the store. "I couldn't breathe," she told the jury. "It felt like my ribs were crushing in." At home, she pulled out the burned passport photo from weeks earlier. She held it side by side with the flyer. Same eyebrows, same dimples, same faint freckle on the left cheek. This wasn't a coincidence. She emailed the photo fragment to an anonymous tip line. She never heard back. But soon, strange things started happening. Her phone began glitching. Cars parked across from her apartment for hours. She started to feel followed, watched. So she moved, changed her number, and quit the job. "I never wanted any part of this," she said, "but I couldn't carry it anymore, not after Kim passed, not after Malia went missing, not after what I found in the trash." Again, silence gripped the room. No objections from the defense, no cross-examination yet. Because sometimes silence says more than words ever could. The prosecution carefully placed an evidence bag on the table. Inside, a scorched piece of paper, its edges blackened, much of it unreadable, but one line was clear. Guest entry protocol. Followed by a list, not of full names but of aliases. The maid leaned forward. "That's one of the pages I found near the fireplace," she said. Her voice trembled, but she continued. She described a routine, the morning after Diddy's most exclusive events. Before anyone arrived, he would sit alone in his den, curtains drawn, fireplace roaring, music low, almost unnoticeable, and he would burn things. Sometimes it was magazines, other times it was folders, stacks of what looked like contracts, journals, notebooks, tapes. She recalled one specific morning. She entered earlier than usual and caught sight of him tossing a thick, black-bound journal into the fire. He turned, saw her. He didn't panic. He just stared and said, "You didn't see that." Then he handed her an envelope. It read, "Silence." "This wasn't paranoia," she told the court. "I was being paid, not just to clean, but to forget." Then came the testimony that made the air in the courtroom go ice cold. The vault room. Door in the West Wing hallway, always locked, always guarded. No staff allowed near it, but one afternoon while delivering dry cleaning to a guest suite, she noticed the door, slightly ajar. She peeked inside. What she saw, a soundproof chamber, wall-to-wall shelving, rows of labeled mini DV tapes and memory cards. Some were marked with first names, others with dates, but most with nothing but numbers. She stepped in. Just once, and then a man appeared behind her. "Turn around," he said, hand moving toward his waistband. She obeyed, didn't speak, didn't blink. "I knew I saw something I wasn't supposed to," she said. From that day forward, she was no longer assigned to post-party cleaning, only before events. She had been pushed out quietly, given a severance package and a warning. "They told me if I ever talked about anything I'd seen..." She paused. "I'd disappear too." The judge stayed still. The jury didn't move. And Diddy? He didn't look up. He kept his eyes glued to the floor. Then the screen lit up with the enhanced photo, the one they'd recovered. Half a face, but the left side was clear. The moment the image hit the courtroom screen, everything stopped. Teenage girl's face only half visible, a soft smile, hair pulled tightly back, a small freckle just beneath her left eye. The maid on the stand stared at the image, then slowly nodded. "That's the one I found in the trash," she said. Gasps rippled through the courtroom gallery. The prosecution didn't hesitate. They wheeled out a large display board, showing two images side by side. On the left, the enhanced partially burned passport photo. On the right, a missing person flyer from 2016, Malia J. Chattin, age 17, last seen, private yacht party, Miami coast. The resemblance was impossible to deny. The timeline aligned perfectly with one of Diddy's exclusive invite-only summer events. "I didn't know who she was when I found it," the maid explained, "but when I saw that poster weeks later, I couldn't unsee it. That's the same." "Girl?" The prosecution pressed. Had she ever seen Malia in person? "No," she replied, "but I remember catching a glimpse of someone who looked just like her on a screen during one of the parties. Just for a second. Then she was gone." Forensic analysts had already confirmed the photo was authentic, a real passport image, partially destroyed. Though the ID number had been melted away, traces of the official watermark were still detectable. Then came the words that shifted the trial entirely. "This is no longer just a misconduct case. This is now a missing person investigation." For the first time in nearly an hour, Diddy looked up, his eyes locked on the screen, unblinking, unmoving. But one reporter noted a subtle twitch at the corner of his mouth. The maid continued her testimony. That particular weekend, she recalled, the mansion was in chaos. Extra cleaners were brought in. The usual party staff vanished. A security team member quit the following week. She overheard two male assistants whispering in the garage. "She freaked out," one said. "Should have never let her in that bedroom." The other replied, "It's handled, but we need to get rid of everything. Now." That was the same day she found the photo in the trash. The courtroom didn't just fall silent. It turned cold. Diddy, known for decades as cool, confident, untouchable, suddenly looked small. At first he stayed still, unreadable. But as the maid spoke, about missing girls, burned tapes, cash-stuffed silence envelopes, his leg began to tremble under the table. He clenched his jaw, looked away every time the word photo was mentioned. A defense lawyer leaned in to whisper. Diddy waved him off. His hand shook. Then the prosecution played a clip from the maid's earlier deposition. It was audio. Her voice recorded weeks ago, describing a moment that haunted her. "I once asked why the fireplace was always burning after the parties. Another staff member told me, that's how the truth dies around here." The words hit the room like thunder. Diddy exhaled hard and buried his face in his hands. One juror shifted, visibly shaken. A court sketch artist raced to capture the moment. When a billionaire, a mogul, visibly broke. Then came another blow. The judge ruled that the passport photo and burned contract fragments could be admitted as official evidence. The defense objected, lack of direct connection. The judge dismissed it. Outside, reporters called it the moment the mask cracked. Inside, Diddy began sweating through his tailored suit. His fingers gripped the edge of the table. A tissue was passed down the row. He took it and wiped his eyes. It was the first time anyone saw him cry in court, not for a failed deal, not for a scandal, but for the mountain of evidence beginning to collapse around him. Then, the prosecution introduced new voices, former House staff, too afraid to appear, publicly, but willing to submit statements and audio clips under protective anonymity. The first was a man. "I used to work East Wing events. We had to surrender our phones. Once someone tried to record something weird happening near the downstairs. Then security tackled him. We never saw him again." The next was a woman, maybe late 30s. "I quit after I realized my paycheck included an NDA I never signed. I was told I'd already agreed. When I refused, I got a call from an unlisted number. They said I'd ruin my life if I pushed it. And then came the most chilling piece, a written statement from a former private security contractor. It detailed a secret room, room 17, not listed on the floor plan, not visible in security feeds. Hidden behind a mirrored panel in the East Wing, room 17 contained padded walls, a single bed, a mounted camera, and a filing cabinet filled with folders. Each folder reportedly held NDAs, Polaroids, and what the contractor described only as leverage material. The judge struck some of it from the formal record pending verification, but it was too late. The press was already running with it. Social media exploded. The world was now peering into the shadows. And then, for the first time that day, Kim Porter's name was spoken. Until that point, she'd been respectfully shielded from the conversation, but the prosecution said it plainly. "We can't ignore the connection between what this maid saw and what happened to Kim Porter." Kim, mother of 3 of Diddy's children, was found dead in her home in November 2018. The official cause? Sudden lobar pneumonia. But her final days were anything but ordinary. Friends said she became paranoid. She reportedly told family, "If anything happens to me, don't believe it was an accident." The maid testified that in the weeks before Kim's death, everything changed in the mansion. The parties stopped. Diddy looked tense. The trash changed. One day, she found a manila folder labeled K-Final in the kitchen bin. She didn't open it. But that same day, a voicemail came through the house phone from Kim. She was crying, panicked. Another staff member deleted the message minutes later, but the maid remembered one line. "They know I'm going to talk. I just don't want to die." "For it," the judge addressed the jury. "These statements are not conclusive, but they are part of a broader narrative. The defense objected. The court noted it, but the damage was done. Kim Porter's death was no longer a footnote. It was now a thread in a much darker web, and this maid had just yanked the loose end. In the final moments of her testimony, the maid revealed the thing that started it all, the trash. For years it was ignored, burned, forgotten, but now, every scorched scrap of paper, every melted Polaroid, every torn envelope had come back to haunt the man who thought his secrets were safe. She presented a sealed bag, inside, burned Polaroids, melted memory cards, handwritten notes with names and dates. "I didn't know what it meant at the time," she said, "but now I know it was insurance." The judge allowed the contents into evidence under protective custody, and then something no one expected. Diddy stood up. He didn't speak, didn't argue. He just walked toward the exit and whispered something to his lawyer. Moments later, the judge called an emergency recess. Diddy's seat remained empty for 2 hours. Rumors swirled: panic attack, breakdown, collapse in the hallway. Flight risk. But one thing was certain. The maid's quiet, overlooked testimony had become the cornerstone of one of the most shocking moments in modern courtroom history. And as the gavel fell, the world was left with one truth. Sometimes the person who brings down an empire is the one who cleaned up after it.